Hello everyone, your MTG ambassador here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a mono black colorless control deck I like to call Tinted Glass. Um, Before we get started, if you like the video by the end of it and you want to leave a like, that'd be greatly appreciated. Help the channel out for free. Also, if you want to take a look in the description and support my Patreon, I'll be more than happy to take a deck list that you post there on Patreon, and I'll pick and choose one that I think is interesting and feature it on the channel. So if you're interested in that, link in the description below. So we'll go ahead and get into this. So this is a control deck, obviously mono black, and I use a lot of colorless themes within it as well, Eldrazi, and the such. So that's my idea for Tinted Glass. We'll start off with the lands, 16 swamps. We're running a total of 22 lands, and we need a lot of double black for a bunch of things, so we need to run as many swamps as possible. But we're also running colorless matter cards such as Thought-Knots here, so we're going to run 3 Drownyard Temples. This does have a Madness sub-theme, which sounds kind of bad for a control deck to be discarding cards, but there are ways that we make it work. We also have 3 Gaia Reach Sanitariums to help us dig to what we need, and we have a lot of ways to pick our opponent's hand. So the symmetry of letting our opponent draw a card is kind of broken. We can also get our opponent empty-handed sometimes, so this is essentially milling them one, whereas for us, it's getting us the card selection that we want. And sometimes because we have a kind of delirium sub theme with cards that I usually run in the sideboard that I'm not going to mention here because they're kind of sketchy. Sometimes just milling ourselves one to get a land that we don't want to draw late in the game out of the way, or pitching a Drownyard Temple so that we can bring it back with its ability is pretty good. So Gaia Reach is definitely important to the deck. And then we'll just go up the curve. We have 3 Sinister Concoctions for that Delirium sub-theme that I was talking about that you won't see in this video. It's kind of funny, but it's really good. It's pretty much 2 mana, destroy target creature, all the stuff that goes along with it. Paying a card, paying a life, milling a card, and discarding a card is pretty rough, but having this out on the battlefield can force your opponents to play around it and maybe not play something until they know they can protect it, which we buys us time. So it's kind of good to stick on turn one because they know something's going to get killed. So they kind of either have to play into it or wait. We have 4 Fatal Pushes. If you don't have the money for that, I completely understand. I got them whenever they were $5. I pre-ordered them before they even came out. I got them for $5 a piece. Um, it seemed with all the hype surrounding it, as it got spoiled and everything, it seemed like a card that I needed to invest in right away. So slammed my $20 bill on the counter and told TCG player to give me those cards. So I can understand if you don't have it. Obviously, it's gone up at the time of the recording of this video. So I can understand if you don't have the fatal pushes. But they work really well, and they work also really well with Sinister Concoction. It can trigger Revolt for us, so we can use Sinister Concoction to kill a very big threat, and then Fatal Push to get rid of a mid-range to small threat. We have 3 gifted Etherborns. I think the only reason I don't have foreign in the deck is because I'm using um, one of them in one of my Tiny Leaders decks. And the same holds true for the next 2 cards, Grasp of Darkness and Collective Brutality. Um, Gifted Etherborn is just amazing against aggro. It's got 3 toughness, so it can block a majority of things that are low on the curve, and it counts as a removal spell itself with the death touch. If they're not using anything that's evasive, they're just trying to get in with big guys, it helps. And the life link uh, helps out a ton. Grasp of Darkness, amazing removal spell, hits a lot of the things we want. Can take out opposing noxious gear hulks, can take down glory bringers before they get exerted. A lot of great things that Grasp does. Can take down Hazaret, which is really important because nothing else in our deck can. We have a lot of things to pick and pry Hazarets out of people's hands before they can get them down, but Grasp is the best. Uh, we have Collective Brutality, once again, getting pretty expensive. I'm not entirely sure if that price tag is worth it. It's definitely one of my favorite cards of all time, so I can understand the price, but I don't think it should be as expensive as it is right now. Once again, I would run four of these, definitely. I'm just using it in another deck right now, and I only have four, and I'm not paying the money to get that fifth one for the other deck. So, um, amazing card. Uh, gets counters and other big removal out of our opponent's hand. Kills a small thing early on so that we take less damage. And draining two is good sometimes. Also, like I said, we're playing a madness sub-theme, so we've got Alms of the Vein, which you can hardcast, and I have many times had to hardcast Alms of the Veins to try and get some reach to finish off the game. But on turn three, Collective Brutality, either of the first two modes, pitching Alms of the Vein to it and draining them five, along with duressing them and or killing a creature is a lot for 3 mana, and it can be a blowout. And if you have 4 mana and you have two Alms of the Veins, you can do all three modes and drain for 8. And that is a humongous swing. So Collective Brutality and Alms of the Vein are my favorite uh, kind of combo, mini combo within the deck. We'll get to some of our creatures that we're running. We're running 4 Filigree Familiars. Once again, for that delirium sub theme, but it's also really good against aggro as well. We get to gain 2 life and trade with something to draw us cards, which we obviously want in a control deck. So just good all around. I feel really confident spending my 3 mana on turn three to play a Filigree Familiar because you get so much value at it. We also have Yahenni, which is an aggressive plan. You can catch your opponent off guard and slam down Yahenni, and then spend the next few turns removing their creatures and making Yahenni bigger and swinging in on their empty board on the back. Also, we can sacrifice Filigree Familiar to her to draw a card and make her indestructible. So she's a threat that stays out there pretty good. It's only Negwan effects like Collective Brutality and Grasp that really take her down, or if we just slam her and they happen to have Magma Spray, then she gets, removed. But most of the time we can stick her and then spend the next turn clearing our opponent's board and getting in. So she's done a lot of work for me. Only running two though, because I don't want to take away too many slots from our removal package. We talked about forearms, the veins, just great to helix your opponent, a lightning helix out of your opponent out of nowhere in black. So the life swing can make a really big difference. Running 4 Thought-Knot Seers, that is our big colorless matters card and why we're running the Drown Yard Temples and Gaia Reach Sanitariums. Just great card, 4/4 for 4, and we get to take something out of our opponent's hand. It also has a kind of funny synergy and a way to make its leaving the battlefield ability not that bad that we'll talk about as we get to the end. But just overall a great card. We have two main board Yahenni's expertise. The only things that die to it are Yahenni, Gifted Etherborn, and Filigree Familiar. And while killing our Gifted Etherborn on Yahenni's expertise isn't that good, if we're in big trouble by turn 4 against an aggro deck, we kind of have to wipe it. And it also gives us another way to cast our Alms of the Vein that isn't outright paying 3 mana for it. So wipe the board, drain you 3 is pretty good. We can also use it to recast a Filigree Familiar or a Yaheni uh, after it. So pretty good. I've also comboed this with Collective Brutality to wipe away all their small creatures and get that big creature that's a 5/5 off the board with the Collective neg 3, followed by the neg 2, neg 2. So great card to have in the main board. It does kill our smaller creatures, but they have usually done their job or gotten in some amount of damage that we're not that worried about it. We're running one Obnixilus reignited. It's just because I have only one. I would definitely want to run two and um, and change things up because Planeswalkers are getting kind of hard to deal with. Chandra is obviously the best Planeswalker right now, but Obnixilus is kind of close if you can use him right. We definitely take advantage of the card draw on the plus ability, and we're gaining enough life from Alms of the Veins, Collective Brutalities, Gifted Etherborns that losing doing the black card draw where you lose a life isn't that bad. Usually we're at 30 life, so we're actually trying to work our way back down to 20 while we're plussing him up. Has a straight up murder as his second ability, so we can slam him and activate that. And his emblem is ridiculous. It says whenever a player draws a card, the person that has the emblem on them loses 2 life. So Gaia Reach Sanitarium becomes you lose 4 life. On activations. If we sacrifice our Filigree Familiar to draw a card, then they lose 2 life. There are so many amazing things that happen with that ability that it kind of feels a lot like a Chandra ability, and you can actually kill sometimes even faster with an Ob Nixilis ability than you can with a Chandra ability if we're using our cards effectively. So it's kind of ridiculous, but I only have the one of, unfortunately. We have two Noxious Gear Hulks. This is obviously one of the big baddies in the black control uh, format. So 5/4 with menace, get to kill something and gain life equals to its toughness. Once again, we're gaining a ton of life. So um, we have a lot of protection against aggro, even against mid range, with how much life we can gain. And this guy's just the best at what he does. Also, once again, an artifact creature kind of fits the tinted glass profile and helps the delirium sub theme of my sideboard. Lastly, we have an interesting one that most people haven't seen. Every time I was trying to find people who have this card, they're like, "What card?" And I'd show them a picture of it, and they didn't know it existed. This is one of the emerge creatures from Eldritch Moon, and I love this one because you get to take something from an opponent's hand that costs 3 or less, and a card that costs 4 or greater. So we can take a counterspell and their payoff card, or we can take a cheap pump spell and a mid-range glory bringer. There's a lot of amazing things that Distant and Mindbender does, and with the emerge ability, we can sacrifice our gifted Etherborn to cast this for only 5. We can cast it on turn 5. We don't have to worry about casting it for 8. Filigree Familiar is my best target for this because we can play Filigree Familiar on turn 3, and then turn 4, if we hit our land drop, cast this, draw a card off the Filigree Familiar, and then pick our opponent's hand clean. We have a 5/5 on turn 4, and we just took 2 cards out of our opponent's hands. And that's assuming if we did nothing uh, in the area of collective brutality on turn 2. So it isn't a humongous payoff. It's definitely not the best payoff, but it does some work. And like I was saying before with Thought Not Seer, we can actually sacrifice Thought Not Seer to this to make this only cost 3, 1 and 2 black. And they, the way the, if you stack your triggers correctly because the cast trigger uh, and Thought Not Seer leaving the battlefield are going to happen at the same time. You can have them draw a card off the Thought Not Seer and then pick their hand so that you have more control over what's left in their hand. That way you don't pick their hand and then they draw a card and that card happens to be good and what you wanted to take. Maybe they have a land and only one card in their hand that you can pick, whether it's the three or less or four or greater, and then they draw a card afterward is pretty bad. So whenever you sack Thought Knot, you let them draw the card from Thought Knot first, and then pick their hand so you can make sure you have the best chances of taking the good cards out of their hand. That's about it for it, though. It has a really good curve. It has a lot of plays from turn one all the way up to the and it just keeps going. We have a lot of ways to dig through our deck so that we don't uh, what's the word I'm looking for? So we don't run out of gas. So it's been one of my favorite decks to play against my friends. It's definitely one of the most controlling decks besides blue-red control that that just kind of keeps creatures locked down. If your opponent isn't doing some silly combo like New Perspectives, which I've also done, um, you kind of just lock them out. And the life gain, especially against aggro and even mid range, all the life gain that's in the deck that we're stealing from our opponent or taking from their creatures with Noxious Gearhulk is kind of absurd. I've ended games where I'm at exactly 40 and my opponent is at exactly 0. So literally stole their entire life essence. So if you guys like this, once again, leave a like. It'll help me out. It'll put the video in more people's suggested feeds. If you have any suggestions, changes that you would put in here, go ahead and leave those in the comments. Otherwise, I'm tapped out. I'll see you guys at the untap step.